Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us for this next cooking demonstration brought to you by Abra. Abra, is it Berens? Abra Berens. Abra Berens. She is semi-local in Three Oaks, correct? At Granor Farm, so you can find her. Another fun fact is Abra was also a nominee for James Beard, is that correct? So if you're in the cooking world, you know that is a very high achievement. So today Abra is going to show us 3 different ways to use chickpeas. These are simple ways that you can get chickpeas, and chickpeas are inexpensive. It's a good way to get protein into your diet, and this is a wonderful way. So she's going to show us 3 different ways. All right, enjoy.
Thank you so much. And thank you, everyone, for coming out. This is, I think, years ago, veganism and plant-based foods was such a niche part of the food world. And I think today is a great example, given the hard work of everyone who organizes this, that this is really something that's taking charge. And as someone who works at a vegetable and grain farm, I fully understand and believe in the importance of raw foods and plant-based foods. And so what I wanted to talk to you today a little bit about, yes, I am at Granor Farm. We're over in Three Oaks. It takes exactly 32 minutes to get from here to there. I did it this morning. We, like I said, are a vegetable and grain farm, but we are also a fully vertically integrated farm. So the dining program that I helped build has a different menu every single weekend, and we base it on our harvest list. And one of the most delightful things about that for me is not only getting to cook close to the earth and showcase the work of the growers that make it all happen, but is also to provide a space for folks that are wanting to eat plant-based or vegan and want to be able to go out to eat, to have a full meal that has no compromises to it and that is a delight for us to put together, because the majority of what we do is vegetarian anyway. It's no sweat to make it vegan. So that's the perspective that I come from. I came up in restaurants that were very meat heavy. And it wasn't until I was farming vegetables that I started to feel some of the differences that the doctor was talking about in the last session. And most of the time when people are thinking about, I want to incorporate more plants into my diet, I don't know where to start, I always say, start with chickpeas. And they're literally one of my favorite ingredients, which is maybe not the foxiest thing to say to someone. Be like, oh, I love a chickpea. But I do. And so what I love about them is simply their versatility and their ability to, I think sometimes that idea of going all in on plant-based eating can be really daunting for folks. And so I wanted to show ways that you can incorporate it in small ways or in ways that you can build on and that are not just a specialty event. So I want to talk today a little bit about these different techniques and then how you can make a big batch and then use it throughout the week. So with that, I know that I'm the only one currently with a microphone, but if you have a question, just holler. I don't know how we'll handle that exactly, but we'll figure it out. We're all smart. Oh, I'll just repeat the question. See, somebody's already figured it out. So just know that that's an option. The way I think about chickpeas, you can buy them dried and you can cook them yourself, and that's great. That takes a little bit of time. It's often the most cost-effective. To be honest, I often buy canned chickpeas because I have a 4-year-old, I have a full-time job, and sometimes I need a fast dinner. And so this whole meal, the 2 things I'm going to show you with the whole chickpeas come out of a can already. And so the first thing, I'm not going to show it to you, but I'm just going to tell you about it, are these crispy chickpeas. So this is a way to you open the can, drain them off. I toss this just with some olive oil, salt, herbs de Provence, and Aleppo pepper. That's because that's the flavor that I liked for it. Put them in the oven and roasted them for about 35 minutes, and now they're crunchy little bar snacks almost. So this for me is something else that I'll have, like I would eat popcorn or any of those sorts of snacks. I also tend to put this in salads in place of croutons or something like that because it gives a really nice crunch and texture to it. And they're super easy easy to make. You can keep them on your counter after the fact, so they'll hold no problem. And it's just another way that if you get a really big can of chickpeas, you can make hummus and you can put the chickpeas into a soup, but this is another way to get to use them. That's a totally different texture. And all it is a little bit of oil, whatever seasonings you want, you could add. I've done it with cumin seed, with coriander, with fennel, with nothing at all, just a little bit of salt, and it gives this extra flavor and depth of texture. So that's the first way. And you'll get to taste these at the end too. The second way that I like to use a canned chickpea is to save that liquid that they've been canned in. So most beans go into the can raw with some water, sometimes some salt, and then they're processed in the can to cook them. So that's what that cooking liquid is. It's called the aquafaba. And I find you get aquafaba from any number of cooked legumes. I think that the chickpea is the most versatile because it's the most neutral flavor, so that means you can use it in more things. And also, it's a pretty clear color. If you're taking black beans and cooking those, that aquafaba is going to be very dark, which has its own set of uses, but that's why I like to start with chickpeas. So in a lot of restaurants, this serves as a substitute for egg generally, either as a binder or as something that is going to whip up into a creamy sauce. So I'm going to make a version of mayo. I love a mayonnaise because it is rich and flavorful. And, you know, when people talk disparagingly about vegan food, I think they think it doesn't have a whole lot of like gusto to it. Well, sometimes that is just lack of seasonings. Sometimes it's lack of fat. And a lot of these plant-based micronutrients are fat soluble. And so they need fat to be accessible to your cells. And that's why, in my mind, I think that they taste so good, is because your body is saying, yes, I want that. And that's true for me with donuts as well, but I think there's a difference. And I think when you learn that difference of what your body is telling you, you'll be doing pretty well. So what's in this, I'm going to make it, I would never actually make it in this container, but I wanted you to be able to see it, so that's why it's sort of a ridiculously big plastic pitcher. In here is about a 1/4 cup of this aquafaba. You can see, sorry, I'm doing the thing that you said about not lifting it up because I want people in the back to see. So this is a clear kind of viscous liquid, came straight out of the can. To it, I'm going to add just some lemon juice, and that's because acidity and seasoning, you know, the doctor was talking about how you can add a squeeze of lemon or balsamic vinegar, any of those things, acidity kind of lifts up the flavor. And so just one little squeeze to start, and you can always add more later, as well as a little pinch of salt. And I grew up in a household that pretty much cut salt out of our diet because my dad has hypertension. But a little bit goes a long way. And it does help make a lot of these flavors more accessible. And so what I'm going to do, this is one of my favorite tools in the kitchen. This is a little immersion blender. And it just has a whisk attachment. If you're ever shopping for one of these, look for ones that you can take that part off. It makes it a lot easier to clean. Little logistical pro tip. And this one is quite zippy, so I've got it just on the lowest section on 3. And we're going to make this the same way that you would make an egg-based mayonnaise, where we're taking, there's a ton of protein in this aquafaba, and we're suspending the oil in that protein. So you're making basically a network of that protein that's holding that fat in place. If you were using this aquafaba to make something like a meringue, you would simply be adding sugar to it to get it to function the same way that an egg white does. So it's a fun ingredient to play around with. So I'm going to whisk it. There's also nothing more nerve-wracking than making mayonnaise in front of about 100 people. So I've got to back up in case it doesn't work. And what you want to do is you're just getting it so that it's starting to froth up some. Ooh. And then slowly drizzling in more. And the nice thing about this aquafaba, it's actually more forgiving than eggs are. I don't know the dietary science behind that, but I know that it doesn't break as often, which is the thing that you say when you really want it to break in front of people. And what I mean by a broken mayo is it just means that the fat and the protein have separated. So what that will look like is basically like a classic kind of Italian vinaigrette where you've got the stuff on the bottom and the oil on top and you shake it. Yes, ma'am. This is oil. So this is
A specific type of oil?
you can make it with any type of oil. This is what we call at the restaurant our neutral oil. So it is sunflower oil as well as a little bit of olive oil and some rapeseed oil. But you could use, we use grapeseed, we use rice bran. I tend to steer away from corn and soy oils only because those markets are well developed and I would like to see other markets be more developed. That's a personal choice on my end. Yeah. And you can make this with olive oil too or avocado oil. Whatever flavors are in that oil are going to be in your mayonnaise. And so you just want to be conscious of that. Good question. Yeah. And you'll see this takes a second and you can use, a whisk and your arm and it will work too. It'll just take longer. And then also you can do it on if you have a stand mixer or I've seen it made in a food processor or with an immersion blender, like the blade part. And you can kind of see now, I learned, I'm not going to lift it up, it's starting to track. So if you can see in which way does it go? This way? You're starting to see the lines be able to shape. And I'm just going to hold it up so that you guys can see. It's starting to get thicker. So it's clear, or it's getting more texture to it. Whoa. We're going to keep going. Sorry for the person who's after me. There's going to be splatters everywhere. And I'm going a little bit unnecessarily slow because I'm also talking. Once you start making this at home, it's really pretty quick. And it lasts for a good long time. And so I usually make a batch of mayo at the beginning of the week, use it throughout the week, and then make another batch. And because there's nothing in it that's going to really go off except for that protein that's in the liquid, and so I do keep it in the fridge. The fridge also helps make it a little stiffer too. And you can see the volume that you get. This is only a quarter cup of the aquafaba, and it's going to give us, about 2 cups of the finished mayo. And you can use this as a base for dressing too. So what you can do if you want to make something that is like almost like a version of a ranch, you can do it just with less oil. It's going to be less stiff than that. And so you can use that as a creamy based dressing that doesn't have any cream in it. So lots of options for that. And so for the sake of time, I'm going to start to move on to the chickpea pancake. But this is effectively what that mayo is. And I can show you what that end result is. This one here. So what we're looking at is something that is nice and thick, and it's going to hold its shape just like that. You can see it there. It all kind of looks just white in the screen, but this is a really nice dollop. This will hold. You can put this on a sandwich of any sort. You can use it as a binder for a chickpea salad if you're replacing a chicken salad. Things like that. It's really, really versatile in that way. And if it were to start to break on you, like I was talking about how it separates out, simply add a little bit more of the bean aquafaba, and that's going to bring it back together. It's really, you just need more of that protein to have the fat suspended into it. Yes, ma'am. Hi. You can. Yeah, I usually just do lemon and salt so people can taste it, just in its most basic. But the question is, could you put mustard in the mayo? You absolutely can. You could put hot sauce in it. You could put pickles in it. You could put any sort of things in to flavor it. We also will add a lot of times like cooked vegetables to this. So like a blended red pepper, things like roasted corn or any of those sorts of things. Anything that you would see in a classic mayo sauce, garlic, capers, all that sort of stuff too. Yeah, it's really a blank canvas for things. Any other questions before we look at the next thing? All right, great. I'm going to separate this just so I don't knock it over because clearly I'm a little nervous and so I keep bopping stuff. Okay. And the recipe, I think we've got recipes that are going to be handed out. The recipe that you've got is for these chickpea pancakes with a spinach salad dressed with that mayo, so a little bit thinner, kind of using it to coat some spinach, and then the crispy chickpeas over the top. And what I like about that is that you're getting all sorts of different textures. You're getting all sorts of different colors, flavors. These chickpea pancakes that we're going to make next are what we call in my household emergency dinner, which is when you get home at like 6:30 and you haven't eaten enough that day and you need something in an emergency, because it comes together. You'll see how fast it comes together. And I'm using chickpea flour. This is from Bob's Red Mill. You can find it at most grocery stores at this point, co-ops. You can order it online. I have not seen a smaller producer option of this yet. You know, there's places where you can get artisanal chickpeas. Sometimes you'll see this in the quote-unquote world food aisle, in the Indian section, Indian subcontinent section, with a black chickpea. A garam flour is another word that often gets used for it. This is something that I always have in my pantry because, again, we go to it all the time. It doesn't go bad. You can keep it in the freezer if that makes you feel better. We don't generally. And the nice thing about this chickpea flour, it's also gluten-free. And so if you're avoiding gluten, it can be a really good coating for, like, say you wanted to do a fried tofu. You could take tofu, coat it in the chickpea flour, and that's going to be your breading for it. It also kind of works in, I like to put it into, like pound cakes, things like that, to give a little bit of extra structure to it. So lots of options for it. And I don't even really measure it anymore, but in general, it's about 1-to-1 chickpea flour to water. And you can use regular water. I like to use soda water because the bubbles give it a little bit more lift. Pinch of salt and a little bit of the soda water. You can make it with regular water too. You can make it with beer. You can make it with, you can make it with champagne if you want, but I think what your budget is. And so you're really seeing in this, it's literally the same as making pancakes. And the texture of it is completely changeable. You can make chickpea fritters by having it be thicker and then frying off those little balls just like you would hush puppies or something like that. You can make it thinner and make it a breading or like a batter. I like to make it so that it's about, this is going to sound dumb, but pancake batter thickness. And the way that I check that is after I have it all whisked together. And you don't have to worry about overworking it because there's no gluten in it. And so it's not going to get tough in that way. I'm just trying to get the lumps out. So any sort of lump that's in there, we're going to take out. And then I like to take my finger and put it through, and the batter should slide down your finger. And at some point, you'll start to see your nail come through. That usually means that it's the right texture for it. And that means it's thin enough that it's going to get kind of these lacy edges, but it's also thick enough that it's not going to spit everywhere with the extra water. The other thing that's important about this is that you have to use more fat than you might think. And every time I've cooked this for my mother-in-law, she'll be like, how can you put that much oil in there? And it's like, because that's the only fat that we're really using in this. And the extra oil that we're gonna add is gonna give it a nice crispy edge. So that's about 1/4 cup of oil for this frying pan. And we're gonna let it coat. And then you'll kind of hear it. I'll try to get close so that you can actually hear it. You're going to hear a sizzle. You hear that? Okay. You want to hear that sizzle because that means the pan and the oil is hot enough. Get all that goodness out. And then what you'll see is that it will start to spread a little bit, and it will seem like you've got way too much oil in the pan. But what happens is that it's gonna basically kind of fry the edges and give you really beautiful color, as well as it's gonna soak into that pancake as a whole and make it really rich and decadent. And that's what makes it feel like a full meal to me. And so this you can do on the stovetop. You can do them thin like this, where it's almost like thicker than a crepe, but more like a pancake style. And you'll see we're starting to get the bubbles in between, like in the center. Just like regular pancakes, what you're looking for are those bubbles to come through and to hold their shape and to start to look like they're dry in the center. That means it's cooking through. You could start this in a pan and put it into the oven and let it finish in the oven. I like to do that when I make a really thick one, because if it's really, really thick, you're never going to be able to cook it all the way through on a burner without it burning. And so by starting it in the pan, you're getting that sizzle from the oil, you're getting the color from the heat, the direct heat. You're never going to get that in the oven in the same way. And so I usually start it in the pan. That's what I did with the samples that we have for you all. Starting it in the pan, get that nice color, finish it in the oven. You can also make these as silver dollar ones. We'll do that for appetizers a lot at the restaurant, that we'll do like little tiny, quarter sized with a 1/4 ounce ladle, and then top it with a little salad and serve that way. You can do that any number of different things. The way that I like to have this at my house is that I will cook it like this, one big pancake, and then I serve wedges of it. And I usually make these 2 or 3 of them at a time, kind of a big batch thing, and then I hold them in the fridge after that. And I use them a lot of times as croutons in a salad. So if they're, especially those nice big thick ones, then they're going to toast up really well. You can just cut them into wedges like I did for the ones that you all are going to sample if you want to. And I'll just toast them in a toaster oven or in the oven, toss them through with a salad, anywhere where you would want a crouton. And now you can see as it's cooking, we've got all of the holes are holding their shape. It's not perfectly even because this burner is a little bit wonky. So I'm just gonna rotate it a little bit so that it's getting more heat over on this side. And you should be, if you're standing close, you're starting to be able to smell it. And that's the smell of, there's gonna be some nice golden brown underneath there. And so what I'm looking for this, before I'm gonna flip it, is I want it to be almost 80% cooked. Because if you flip it and it's not, it's gonna either break or it's going to spill everywhere. None of that is the end of the world. Just flip it, let it come back together. And it really just depends on how you're presenting it. So like I said, when I'm cooking it at home, if I'm gonna flip it out, I wanna serve a wedge. I usually do it with a big salad. So again, the recipe that you'll get has a spinach salad with the crispy chickpeas. In the summertime, I love this with like tomatoes and cucumbers and olive oil. You could add avocado to that. In the wintertime, I like it with a raw shaved Brussels sprout salad that has some hazelnuts and maybe some dried cranberries. All sorts of, it's really a vehicle for all of these different flavors to be able to make a complete meal. And that's the other thing that I find with chickpeas, is that they're endlessly adaptable, and so you can tuck them in anywhere, and they're remarkably simple. I think that 90% of people only think that chickpeas can be used for hummus, and I mean, hummus is great. Please don't let the hummus table come after me. I love hummus, but there are other things that we can do. And conversely, you can make hummus with any type of legume. So you can make it with lentils. You can make it with other beans, like a black bean hummus, a BBLT, black bean lettuce and tomato sandwich is one of my favorite summer treats. I usually cook the black beans with some cumin, a little bit of chili flake, and smoked paprika. And then blend it up with that liquid and make a really nice dip for it. This is also something that can take the place of like a mashed potatoes. It's a little bit rich for that, but if you add a little bit more liquid to it, it will soften up, and that can be your puree underneath some roasted squash with a kale salad, or a little bit of pickled onion on that would be nice. So kind of having, the way that I tend to cook is thinking about having a bunch of things in your back pocket that you can kind of mix and match. It's sort of like, I think of the chickpeas as like the perfect black dress that you can put with heels or some red Converse All-Stars and a jean jacket. You know, you can move it around a lot. And I think that for the people who don't wear black dresses, I'll think up another analogy later on. You talk about it afterwards. And so that's how I think about these, as opposed to a single recipe that you have to follow. Now, if you were ever feeling insecure about yourself, you would not want to flip a big pancake in front of people. So I'm going to give this just a little bit longer to hold my nerve, and talk to you a little bit about the other things that we do at Granor Farm. We, in addition to, and does everybody know where Three Oaks is? Okay, north and west a little bit. Okay, forgot where I was when I said that. And so we also host a bunch of cooking classes, different cooking classes that teach these sorts of techniques. And we're going to do a plant-based set of classes in the fall. We also are a place where we try to get people together to gather. So people think of farms just in the summertime, but they are truly year-round. Melissa's taking its sweet time. Thankfully, that's why I make them in advance. And so oh, great, thank you. And so, yeah, if we host dinners 12 months out of the year, and have a great botanical dining room for parties and things like that. But does anybody have any questions? I was just told that we have a microphone for that.
And you use this, do you suggest the cast iron always? Or?
This is what I cook on most of the time. I'm a big non-stick person. I came up in a household that had non-stick pans. I don't think that you actually truly need them. And I love this cast iron because it's heavy. And so the heat distributes really evenly, so you don't get hot spots. And then also it's, this is my grandmother's pan, so it's seen its fair share of dinners, and it's always come through. Yeah, beyond that, the only thing you don't want to put in cast iron is anything acidic. So if you're making like a rhubarb blueberry crumble, I would not bake it in this because it will taste like you have a penny in your mouth. And you can kind of, sometimes tomatoes will do that too, depending on if they're high acid or not. But yeah. What other question do you all have? Yes, ma'am.
I have a question about the chickpeas. When you're making the crispy chickpeas, do you rinse and dry them before you put the oil on, or?
I rinse them mostly because they can get a little gloppy otherwise because of how viscous that aquafaba is. I don't spend the time drying them. I just cook them for longer. And so if you have a convection fan, that convection fan will help a good deal, because what convection is doing is when you are cooking in a dry heat environment versus a wet heat environment, which is something nobody actually should ever say out loud, is a dry heat is taking the moisture out of the ingredient and giving it that kind of crispy exoskeleton. Whereas you can think of it as like roasting versus steaming. So if you were steaming a carrot, you're going to have a softer end result, and it's going to have all of that moisture in it. If you're roasting it, you're wicking that moisture out of the outside of it while the heat penetrates to the center. The same is true for the chickpeas. So if you were to slow cook them to make a stew, that's going to be that wet environment. To get them crispy, you need to pull that moisture out. So you could dry them and spend time and let them go. It will cut down on the cooking time by probably about 25 to 30% of time. But I just stick them in there and I let them go for a little bit because I'm not worried that they're going to burn. And it's usually, I do them anywhere from 350 to 425 based on what else I'm cooking that day. And I just adjust the time. Yeah. Yeah, and just keep an eye on it. And if they get soft, and sometimes that's the other thing too, is that you can take them so that they're super crispy, like a chip, kind of texture, or you can go about halfway. And so just the outside is crispy and then the interior is still really creamy. That can be a really nice textural element. Another thing that I do for a fast dinner, I love garlic. And so I will sweat a bunch of I'll put oil in the pan and then add the garlic and kind of slowly cook it so that it gets that kind of roasty garlic flavor, and then add chickpeas to it and basically smash them so that they're kind of like a chunky mashed potato sort of thing, and then finish it with a little bit more olive oil and salt, and it's so good, especially with again, anything that's kind of bright and acidic, like a roasty tomato or, roasted bell peppers. This time of year, I would probably think about that with asparagus is coming soon, things like that.
Dish that with the garlic, and do you take it out of the can, keep it in with the don't rinse it then, right?
For that one, I rinse it. Basically, if I'm ever eating just straight chickpeas, I rinse that aquafaba away. But when I drain it out of the can, I'll save that liquid so that I can make the mayo to go with it. Or until you get a fridge full of aquafaba, and then you have to get rid of some. Yeah. Which happens a lot. Yeah. All right, shall we see if this is going to happen? So what I will do, and you'll see now, oh yeah, here we go. We're doing it. Let's make this happen. Okay, so if you ever want to flip something out and you're feeling nervous about it, just put your cutting board right on top. That's the only downside of cast iron. So you can see that's where it was browning and we could smell it, and I turned it down so we didn't get the color as evenly across. That's a problem with this burner, not with the recipe. But if you were, to be clear, if you were to put it into the oven, you would get a little bit more of that. And then I'll try to get close, but what you're looking for, the definition, the chef definition of success on this is that when you cut it, there'll be a little bit of a crackle. So I'm going to try to get close enough so that you can hear it. Did you hear it? We got the crackle. All right. No one's going to eat this one because my head was really close to it. I got some cleaner ones. And so this is where, again, I would just take that wedge. And what I love about this is you can see, I'll try to show you on the thing. This one is going to have that textural difference between the super crispy outside and then that really creamy, almost buttery, is it going to lift out of the pan texture? And what I think about when people say, oh, I'm not a very good cook, or, X, Y, or Z, most cooks are not. What we've learned is that to keep what makes a good meal is often, it's a form of entertainment, and what you're looking for is engagement. And Michael Mina, who's a, fancy chef in San Francisco, was a firm believer that the mouth fatigues after 3 bites. Nobody in their right mind is going to cook that way at home, but it's an interesting idea that if what you're looking for, if everything is the same, it's the same texture, it's the same color, it's the same flavor, there's nothing to keep you excited. And so if you add those little pops of diversity and change to a dish, either by texture change, temperature change, flavor change, all of those things help keep something exciting. So, the doctor in the previous panel said, just come on, eat 1 salad a day. That's a good place to start. Well, if you're slogging through a whole bowl of romaine lettuce and it's just lettuce, it's not very exciting. But if you add some texture into it, or you have something where the first bite is crispy and the second part of the bite is tender and creamy, that's going to keep people engaged. And my favorite thing in the whole world, again, my dad's a real meat and potatoes guy, is that when he comes over, he'll realize at the end, he'll be like, there wasn't any meat in this dinner. And I was like, yeah, weren't any eggs or dairy either. Didn't notice, did you? And it's because he was engaged, I mean, I'm sure in the like thrilling conversation, but also that he was entertained by the food. And I think that if you can think about your guests in that way, that can be a really beautiful way to plan a menu. What other questions do you guys have? We've got one here. Is there a microphone, or I'll yell?
Like that?
The question was if for the roasted chickpeas, if you were to replace the oil with aquafaba. To be honest, I don't know. I've never done it. The reason I don't think that it would get that same level of browning is because you're benefiting from the fat in the oil that's going to brown. So the same reason when you cook with butter, things brown faster, the same is true with any fat to varying degrees. So I would... But I'm going to try it and see. And and that's the other thing too, is like, try it, like what's the worst thing that's going to happen? You're going to have some cooked peas the chickpeas that are maybe not like the perfect ones. They're still chickpeas. They're still going to eat them. And you can always chop them up and put them into granola if they're like totally just way too crunchy or something. Yeah. Sorry, there was another question here. Yeah. Hi.
I was going to answer her question. No, it doesn't really work. It's kind of all gunky, It's. I mean, you could still eat it, but it's just not as good.
And there's a difference between edible and inedible, but glunky versus non-glunky.
Because the aquafaba just kind of gets a hard sludge.
Yeah.
It's not really working. Yeah. But no, my question was just when you are using a quarter of a cup, is that 1 can? Is there about a quarter cup in 1 can, a 15.5-ounce can of garbanzo beans, would you say?
The one that when I was testing this recipe to write it for you, I bought just like an average can, and that's about what came out. Yeah, I tend to buy them in those number 10 cans, like the big restaurant ones. So, but yeah, the home one that I tested this on was about that. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And you can scale it too. So when I made the mayo for you all to taste, I think I had a full cup of it, and you can make bigger or less. It's just going to take more oil or less oil, more salt, less salt. Mm-hmm. What other questions do you have? Yes, ma'am.
The reason it isn't going to work because your aquafaba is water, basically. It'll only get to 212 degrees.
There you go.
And the oil gets warmer, hotter.
See, this is what I love about conferences, is that like when you don't know the answer, it's just okay to say, I don't know. And then somebody does. And that makes total sense. And it was just, I was thinking about the protein that's in it because protein will brown, but that makes more sense because obviously the oil's going to cook at a higher temp. Thank you. Yeah. Yes, ma'am. Oh, sorry. We got one over here.
I just had a question. You were saying that you could use the aquafaba as an egg replacer. Can you do that like in muffins or pancakes? I mean, usually I use flaxseed.
My understanding is yes, that is not my wheelhouse 100%. So I would say the internet will give you a lot of recipes. If you were to say like Google like chickpea egg white replacement muffin, sort of thing, I would read 10 of them, see what they have in common, and then distill out in that way. Yeah, that's usually a good rule of thumb because now that we're getting like the AI slop recipes that are coming out, so you'll start to notice the outliers. Yeah.
Me and Colleen call them combunzo beans instead.
There you go. I couldn't have said it better. Yeah. There was another question.
I was just going to answer her question. There's a cook out there called PB, Cooking with PB. Mm-hmm. He does all kinds of aquafaba recipes.
I would have thought peanut butter. Great. All right, so in order, instead of making the whole dish, I brought just samples of these individual things. So I'm going to start to fill the little cones of samples. And I think what's going to be easiest, I'm going to hand them off to these beautiful volunteers who will be able to start walking them out to you. The chickpea mayo is going to be just on a little bit of a little spoon thingy for people to taste. But feel free to shout out more questions as we go. Any other questions? That's the fastest half hour of my life. Yes, ma'am.
2 questions, actually. Mm-hmm. So with the chickpeas that you roast, and you said you can leave them on the counter, how long can you let them be? Are they pretty much stable?
They're pretty much stable. What's going to happen, thank you, is they'll soften up, just like if you were making something. And actually, you guys can also help spoon. So we're just doing a spoonful, and then a dollop. There you go.
And then second question, what's your favorite season to cook for on the farm? Because I've been looking at the Granor Farm dinners.
I would say anytime. I think right now is actually the hardest time to cook. In that, thank you. We're kind of working through our storage crops, and we are not yet in full summer swing. And so I would say anytime from June to April, which is kind of a big window. But I really love the fall when you have the perfect blend of tomatoes and, yes, please, and squash. When those two come together, I think it's absolutely my favorite. Thank you. What other questions do you all have? Yes, and I should say too, so we do these dinners every weekend. We usually do a cooking class every Thursday, but this summer we're also expanding our farmhouse yard, and so we just planted like 80 trees, and big ones. So there's going to be plenty of shade, and we're going to start to do food out of the picnic bar along with drinks, and it's a really nice way for families to spend an afternoon too. And that's Fridays and Saturdays, Sundays in the summer. Yeah, another question?
The mayonnaise, I had to walk out for a second. So it was about a quarter cup of the
aquafaba.
what's it called?
Aquafaba.
Aquafaba. And then how much of it was oil? The rest of it?
It's about 4 parts oil to 1 part aquafaba.
Anything else in there?
I put a little lemon and a little salt, but you could add other things too.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Well, like I said, again, thank you for taking the time on your Sunday to come out and explore the style of eating. As a local food producer, there's no better return on investment than investing in your regional food economy. The last statistic that I saw was that for every dollar spent in a regional food economy, it generates about $1.87 in economic activity. And I don't know of a better return on that investment. And that's jobs, it's all sorts of things for our area that makes it really critical. And I think events like this help bring a lot of these small producers together. And I just really appreciate the people who make that happen through this organization, and also the other producers that give us some different options besides the big boys that send blue trucks around everywhere. So thank you all for being here and supporting those businesses. Yes, ma'am. They'll keep. I've kept them out for a week or so. What'll happen is that they'll get soft because of the humidity. So they'll lose their crisp, and then I just put them back in the oven if I want them crispier. No, you don't need to. If you refrigerate them, though, we'll get softer faster. Yeah, which is fine. Then you just put them back in the oven. You can do that a couple times. So, yeah. Well, thank you all so much. I'm going to help scoop.